Welcome to the Planning for Life podcast with certified financial planner professional Russell Jacobs and financial life advisor Carl Coolidge. Carl and Russell will share creative strategies and ideas for overcoming challenges in your personal and financial life. Inevitably, life happens, and we will empower you to reach your destination. Thanks for joining us. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Carl Coolidge with Jacobs Coolidge and Company, and we'll be interviewing a very good friend of mine, Kevin Coyle. He is a physician and local entrepreneur. And Kevin, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Carl. It's great to be here. First time on live podcast, so hopefully we can put all the points across and let everybody know what's going on down here in Brunswick, Georgia.
Absolutely. You're going to do great. So really just wanted to start off and give the audience a little bit of, your story, if you will, because I always think you have a unique story of how you came, from school on to engineering and then physician and now entrepreneur. So just tell us a little bit about that, or how you went about making that process work.
Well, start of everything, really, I grew up in a beach town in Long Branch, New Jersey, and had two brothers, and we all excelled academically, but more so, I think, from our father, who was a business manager, taught us how to really work with people, and kind of leads into the story as we go, I guess my life story, that is. And my older brother was a student at Georgia Tech. We had some family in the Atlanta area, which drew us there, and it was a hard thing for the rest of us to pass up. So I followed with him, and then my younger brother also to Georgia Tech. And I think that is a start to who I am today. The thing that I tell people, or young folks here that are applying there or want to go to school there, is that regardless of your major or your career direction or your end game, which you should be thinking about at that point,
right.
Of course, when you're 18, 19, it's hard to think about anything else.
Yes.
But thinking about that end game, the thing that Georgia Tech does, in my mind, is it teaches people how to think critically as to why. We don't follow flow charts in our mind at Georgia Tech. The engineers want to know how and why things are going to reach that end game. And although my career path kind of shifted during college, I thought I was going to be an engineer when I went there, and shifted more towards medicine.
Yeah. So how did you make that delineation? I know you told me you actually got your engineering degree.
Well, no, I didn't. No,
okay, you were close.
No, I was very close, and I ended up with a minor.
Okay.
But I could have finished it if I finished one more quarter. But I was studying mechanical engineering, and then I took a job as a co-op engineer with Georgia Power.
Right.
And I worked in distribution engineering. It was kind of a mechanical and electrical engineering job out in Austell, Georgia, west of Atlanta, where I worked every other quarter. And this is when the Georgia system was still on quarters and not semesters. So I stayed in Atlanta all year round, and I was working for Georgia Power, and I liked this job. It was a distribution job, so there was a lot of field work. So I would go out with the field, line crews, we would design underground subdivision design, and this was a good job as far as allowing me to think and see an end product actually in the field and work with other individuals there. Now, as I started to improve, the thing that I didn't do at first was I didn't look at the end game. Where do you go? You can't just stay as a low-level distribution engineer. Well, you could, but that wouldn't be advancing the career. So as I advanced and as I got promoted, the more I ended up in a cubicle. So that was not appealing to me.
Yeah, I can't see that being your thing.
No, less people. Can't talk to them. You're having meetings about when the next meeting is going to be. And that's when I started to say, okay, I've always been interested in medicine. Maybe I ought to either change my major or add a major. So at the time, I added the major of biology, thinking I would, play this out. Maybe bioengineering was the way to go.
Okay.
And then when it got to the point where I said, I do want to go to medical school. There were times when I was a senior in high school where I had a back injury, which some people in this room are familiar with.
Yes.
When I have a back injury, I got to meet some orthopedic surgeons. they were very passionate about what they did, helped me out a lot. And I said, you know what, I think I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I started down that pathway, started to enjoy the biology type classes. I was doing well in those classes, so I shifted and finished with a degree in biology and almost with that mechanical engineering degree, but time was coming to go to medical school, so I had to graduate. So the double major attempt was not fully complete, so I went on to medical school.
So you went to med school. So tell me why you ended up, and I'll let you, at the Royal School, but why you ended up there versus, I know traditionally a lot of physicians end up at Medical College of Georgia, especially when you're already up there, but why did you make that?
So I did very well at Georgia Tech, but I wasn't a 4.0 student, and medical school is quite competitive. So when you have you still graduated with honors from Georgia Tech, but when you have that situation, when you're in my situation, most of the time you're going to apply and get into that in-state school. So with me being from New Jersey, Georgia considered me an out-of-state student. So my chance of getting into the Medical College of Georgia was slim.
Okay.
Plus, at the time, I wasn't open-minded as to location, and Augusta was kind of a place I wasn't ready to go to. I thought I was a city person at the time.
Right.
And so I applied to some private schools in the South, some public schools, and mostly private schools up north. And New Jersey decided that I was a Georgia resident because I had multiple W-2s and was working for Georgia Power. So I had no in-state advantage at the time. So I only got into one private school in the United States, which is considered quite good, an Ivy League school.
Oh.
And then I also applied to the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. Ireland, my father's heritage, always intrigued me as an opportunity, and I looked for a more international school and looked for that experience. And after meeting several representatives from the school, I had my interviews in New York City and accepted the position at the Royal College of Surgeons without even visiting the school and without having been to Europe before I finished at Georgia Tech. And in hindsight, that was the best decision I ever made.
Okay, so, which is a very cool story, but what, as you said, you've never been to Europe, you never even went to school, you just had a gut feeling, I want to make this jump, I want to expand my horizons, or? Part
of it was gut, but then the technical analysis of the school, as a Georgia Tech man, I had to look at all of the details. So I didn't want to end up in Europe and then not be able to come back and practice in an area of my choosing or get in a training program that I wanted. So I looked at the results of international schools and placement in residency programs in the United States and saw how competitive they were. And the Royal College of Surgeons, their residency placements were at very reputable and excelling institutions. I also looked at the curriculum. So a lot of medical schools in the United States now are very geared towards graduation, scoring well on tests.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much the traditional medical program that it used to be when, say, Harvard started in the United States in 1700 and whatever. And I am more of a traditionalist from that end. To each their own. There are some good things about a more testing-based American system, but I do feel like as a comparison to the European way, you're taught to treat patients, treat symptoms, properly examine patients in Europe, whereas, or I should say the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, you are the more traditional way before sitting in front of a patient and just ordering a bunch of tests to reach that final conclusion. So
much more hands-on.
Yes, much more hands-on. And the pace was a little slower, so allowed for a better lifestyle during medical school. So the Royal College of Surgeons is a 5-year school, essentially achieving almost the same, maybe a little bit longer than an American school where everything is crammed in over 4 years.
Okay. So you went there, got your medical degree, focused
Yes.
on anesthesiology.
Yes.
And then tell me about the next step, coming back to the States and residency, and how you really focused on the pain management side.
Okay. Well, before that, I would say one of the key factors also in a lot of these decisions was meeting my wife in Ireland, who her name is Helena. She is actually from southern Sweden, and had a desire to go to an English-speaking medical school to leave her options open in the future. So we were married in medical school, and when we applied for residencies, the residency is done through a matching program where applicants and residency programs rank individuals. So this was not, the location was just not a choice of my own. It was actually a couple's decision. So they have a way of matching it so that we end up in the same place.
And Helena is a
pediatrician.
Okay.
Yes. And we had ranked all of our programs and ended up matching at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, where we were both very happy with those academic programs and clinical experience, which also came into play with a lot of the philosophy that we had. It was very hands-on experience, and Charleston's a beautiful town, so that fed my desire to get back to the coast. And at that point during residency, anesthesia was very enjoyable. It was quite intense on a lot of occasions, especially when you're taking call and doing trauma situations.
Right.
And while a lot of people enjoy that big adrenaline rush with certain activities like trauma surgeons do,
right,
this is where I think my ability to look at the end game and say, hey, are you going to be happy with doing this in the future when you start a family? Is this going to be the right thing for you?
Mm-hmm.
And while it could have been, and you can make that happen, I started to branch off and look at some of the subspecialties of anesthesia, one of which is pain medicine or interventional pain medicine, which is what I do now. And from that, I decided that the chronic pain physician works more of that 8 to 5 job versus the called in the middle of the night.
Right.
So it allowed for better family planning, future planning, and more comfortable lifestyle without all of that adrenaline rush that can get a little bit taxing on medical professionals. So I moved on and did a fellowship at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And then when I was complete there, went on to look for permanent positions outside of training. And that's when I started to look all around the Southeast, preferably looking to get back to Georgia. I always felt like my time at Georgia Tech and time after that, it was a place that I always felt more like home than any other. And my younger brother was still living in Atlanta, so that was a focus
right.
at the time. And there was one weekend where I was interviewing in Charlotte. Actually, I was on my way to interview in Charlotte, and I wanted to see what this practice was about in Charlotte, but it was a very large practice. It was impersonal. It was very corporate.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to start small. I wanted that opportunity to change a business, add my flair to it. And that one wasn't it. But on my way there, I got a call from a headhunter that said, would you like to move down to St. Simon's Island, Georgia? And I had been there once before, and my answer was promptly, hell yeah. So that's when I came down to Brunswick, St. Simon's, Golden Isles area, and I was meeting with a single practitioner that opened a practice here and was looking to expand and hold up with demand. And with that was an opportunity to become a partner in a very short amount of time. So
I was going to say that's where, to me, part of your entrepreneurial spirit kicked in. Instead of the corporate setting, you wanted something, as you said, to build your own and have, the ability to have a much better plan for your future and your family.
Yes, absolutely. Everything then became about starting not starting a family. I'd already had one child at the time, and my wife was pregnant with our second at that time, and we were looking to set something up where it was flexible, where I could spend more time with my family and have more control over the lifestyle. And this provided that opportunity in doing that.
Great. So, great information on your career. I think it's a really unique process, as I've shared with you before. How do you keep yourself focused? I mean, I've always felt like you're one of the brightest guys I know. And also, you just seem to have a lot of things going on because obviously, so the audience knows he has 4 children now. So he, as you can imagine, he stays very busy with that, but also running his practice and also entrepreneurial spirit, which I'll let him get into how he evolved into his next adventure. So I would just say, what really keeps you focused on being able to do all of this?
I think it's more so looking at that long-term vision, something that people earlier in their careers are looking for. Hey, how is it going to be next month? Or
right.
A couple months from now. It's really about looking at, okay, where am I going to be in 5 years? What am I going to be doing next year? And kind of blending the decisions you make today so that it all builds up and becomes a success 5 years from now, versus worrying about all the little minute tasks and small failures or small successes that you have on a daily basis. So coming up with a big picture plan and following through. It's just like folks that work out every day or 3 times a week. You're not going to get those results that you want after 1 week. You're going to get the results after 6 months.
Right.
And staying the course and keeping focused. Because yes, it is a rat race. There's we have 4 children who are playing sports and 30, 40, 50 miles away on any given Saturday and running around doing all of that. And it can become overwhelming, but you're doing it all for that end game. And with the medical practice now, we have, since it's been a little over 3 years since my partner and I did sell the practice to a large corporate entity. And that has allowed me more time because I really don't have the administrative duties that I had before.
Right.
But while some would just sit back and relax and do nothing or enjoy all of that extra time, my brother and I and 2 other business partners from Brunswick had decided that we were going to follow another passion of ours in the Coyle family, and that's brewing beer. So my brother Jeff and I have been brewing beer for many years, and which I did start in college. Wasn't very good at it at first. Some of those batches we drank only because we made it and it was cheap.
Right. Well,
But
that goes back to your Atlanta time at Tech too, because you worked with a brewery that kind of helped you.
Yes, there was a local brewery that opened there in 1995, which is quite popular, the Sweetwater Brewing Company, and I actually didn't work there. I volunteered. There was a roommate of mine, a gentleman, another entrepreneur by the name of Dave Brodigan, who works in refrigeration there in Atlanta now, and is quite successful. We were roommates at the time, and he said, as part of our fraternity, we had to do community service hours, and helping out a local business counted. And he said he found the best local business, that was Sweetwater Brewing Company.
Absolutely.
So we went over there, and there was they were great people. They were just getting started and very passionate about beer. And I think that was their passion really bled through onto us. And we enjoyed hanging out there for the time we were there. And you
felt like you learned some things.
Absolutely.
From what they did.
Learned a lot about, the process and over the years was able to fine tune those processes. And Jeff and I had always talked about we were going to open this brewery. And if anybody in the world knows me more than anybody else, it's my younger brother, Jeff. And I'd like to say I'm the same way with him. And we always thought when we got to a point in our careers where we could,
right,
we would open this brewery. So that time was supposed to be about 2 years from now, but then Georgia changed their brewing laws and allowed it more advantageous for someone to open a brewery. And although it wasn't the perfect time, personally, professionally, it was that perfect time to jump here in Brunswick, Georgia, where now we do have, there's one official brew pub that is open prior to us opening, but we're going to be the first large production and distribution brewery in southeast Georgia, not including Savannah.
Right. Well, I think that goes to your long-term vision. As you mentioned earlier, you think big picture, and you had this in mind with you and Jeff years ago. And when your big pictures come earlier, that's never a bad thing, obviously. But so get into actually the brewery. Tell us about it. Give us some information of what's going on there.
So the brewery's name is Silver Bluff Brewing Company. And Silver Bluff is really, well, actually taking a step back, I think our life experiences allowed us to sit down and do this the right way in the right time frame. So we've been working on this for over 2 years now, and sitting down with our partners, which is Jeff Coyle, Chris Moline, and Allie Moline, and sitting down and deciding what we're about. And, Jeff and I's philosophy on beer, Chris and Allie's philosophies on community, we all kind of came together there. So we decided, even before we came up with any name or vision, we had many vision meetings and actually discussed, what do we want to be about? We want to be about bringing this community together. So Golden Isles on some occasions can be a little bit of a fractured community. You have some folks that live on Jekyll Island. There's people that live on St. Simon's Island, Sea Island, Brunswick, and you have the South Brunswick downtown folks. You have the North Glen folks. And it does tend to be separate on occasion. There's not a lot of intermingling on occasion. We really want to bring those folks together. We want someone who lives in all those areas to be sitting at a table enjoying the same type of beer for what it is, and keeping things simple. So what Silver Bluff means, and I have to give Megan Coyle, my sister-in-law, credit for finding this, is Silver Bluff is actually a geological term. And the Silver Bluff is a layer of soil that's long since been covered. But the last time all of those places were connected by one landmass, which was there may or may not have been some human form walking around then, 40,000 years ago or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Megan would be able to spout that out. Right. But they were all connected by one landmass. And that's what we were about. So it's the Silver Bluff Brewing Company. And we're not here to bring sensationalist beers and crazy styles this way or the other, although there may be out there, but brewing classic styles of beer quite well and clean with no beer snobbery. We can be beer geeks. Right. And some would say that everybody that went to Georgia Tech, my brother and I, we are geeks, but hey, it's okay. But we're not going to be beer snobs. If someone wants to come and drink a German light Pilsner to replace their low-calorie commercial beer at our place, we will enjoy it, and we'll enjoy it together, and we'll say, hey, this is a well-made beer, and we're glad that you have found something here that you really like. They don't have to drink the 10% double IPA made with all kinds of crazy other ingredients. So that's what we're about, and we're also about bringing up Brunswick. So it was always part of this that we wanted to be in historic Brunswick, Georgia, because this is a community that, since I've lived here for over 10 years, I always felt like Brunswick could be a lot more than it is. And a lot of people have these visions, but no one's ever, a lot of people have done stuff about it too. Right. But with this, we want to be part of that. We want to be part of the rising of downtown Brunswick from an economic perspective. So that's why this is going to be situated right in Old Town, Brunswick, Georgia, on Newcastle Street.
And tell us about, where you stand. I know you're beginning the building. Obviously, you have your beers ready, all the recipes that you and Jeff have developed over the years. So give us some idea of when you think you'll be up and running, what the place is going to look like.
So here's something that we've learned over time is we're going to pour some beers out of our tap room in 2019, but I'm not going to give a date.
Okay, fair enough.
This business has tested our patience, and I'm glad we've had life experiences to test our patience up to this point, because we've had just about every delay you possibly can. We were about to start building 6 weeks ago, and then when the federal government shut down, it influenced our federal SBA loan, and we were put on pause. So we've had a big pile of steel sitting behind our footers that are poured on our lot. And but since the government has reopened, we actually are going full bore over the next couple days. And this is exciting. So good timing for the podcast, because I think after I leave here today, I want to go down to the build site. And I think we're going to see some pillars up for the corners of the building. So nothing like seeing the fruits of your labor actually constructed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
you're going to tell us about the parts of the building.
So there is a historic structure that we did purchase, and that will be more for future use. So we're stabilizing that building. It may be used for event space before then or event space later on, but that'll be for future expansion. Next to it will be an outdoor beer garden, and with a covered band stage for events. We're going to have music on the weekends. Next to that will be the tap room, which is the serving room. Okay. This is not a brew pub. This is not a restaurant. So this will be for beer drinking there. If people want to bring food, they can. If they want to have food delivered, which a lot of the local restaurants who have done quite well in that area, we didn't feel like we wanted to take any of their business away food-wise. So we're going to be working in partnership with local businesses, local restaurants, so they can deliver to the beer garden or tap room.
That's a great idea.
Next to the tap room will be the brew house. So that's where all the magic happens.
Your favorite
my
spot.
Domain. Yes, my domain. Lots of stainless steel and shiny toys in the brew house, where we have a 15 barrel brew house. So 15 barrels is approximately 450 gallons. So you can brew about 450 gallons of beer on one run.
Okay.
And when you do that, so in order to increase your efficiency with the brew house, we actually do have 30 barrel fermenters. So on some days we'll brew 2 batches of the same beer, fill up a 30 barrel or 900 gallon fermenter, and then have that amount of beer ready in either 2 to 6 weeks, depending on the type of beer that you're brewing in those situations.
Okay.
So those beers will be kegged for local distribution at local bars around here at first, local restaurants, and also our tap room. And then we also have a canning line. So we will be canning some year-round beers for distribution around the state of Georgia initially, and hopefully spanning out along the East Coast. Our plan initially is a golden ale, and I know Carl has test drove all of these beers.
Yes,
here,
a few of them.
Which brings another point, too, as to something that Carl's actually inspired me to do with these beers, but I'll come to that after we get through them. So there's the golden ale, there's a Mexican lager, so lighter, more refreshing beers, and then we'll have a pale ale, which is a more hoppy beer, but what we call sessionable in the beer industry. That means you can have several and not be stumbling all over yourself. And then we will have an IPA also, which the Silver Bluff IPA is less sessionable, but more for those hop heads out there, which I enjoy myself too.
All right.
And one point with all of these beers is that, sorry to share some of your medical history here,
no
Carl,
problem.
but Carl has a gluten intolerance that he discovered years ago with the help of his wife. And I heard that and I said, well, I've had some gluten-free beers before and they're absolutely terrible.
Absolutely.
So let's see if we can figure out a way to make a good gluten-free beer. And Carl will tell you that my first couple experiments, not quite as successful.
He was working on it.
So using all gluten-free ingredients was a tough thing to do. So as a scientist, I did more research. And I found a place out of San Diego that makes a product that allows beers that are made with gluten-full ingredients, allows you to drop those gluten proteins basically out of the beer so that when you serve the beer, you don't have those gluten proteins in there and you're less than the 10 parts per million gluten. And every beer brewed at Silver Bluff Brewing Company will be produced to
remove the gluten.
Well, not completely, but to produce low levels of gluten. And as my guinea pig, we've tested all of these out on Carl, and he could tell you how that's worked out.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, a lot of people get the stigma that once they hear something is reduced gluten or gluten-free or any of those terms, that they automatically think it tastes bad, which is true for a lot of things that I can speak from firsthand experience. But with his beer, a lot of times he won't even share with someone that's tasting it that it's had that lower parts per million on the gluten, and then afterwards he tells them, and I can absolutely reassure everyone it makes no difference to the taste. It's just a much better feeling on the back end, which is something very different with this beer. So, well, obviously a lot of people are looking forward to it. There's a lot of anticipation for this, especially bringing some vibrance to downtown Brunswick and obviously creating a stir and a buzz and also jobs for people. And it's all around a positive thing. And you get to kind of get that big picture out that you've been looking for years. So I guess in wrapping up, is there any parting words you want to say or any wisdom you would give to anyone? Because you just had, such a good life experience in different avenues. Is there anything you'd want to share with people at this point?
Well, I think mainly it comes back to that big picture outlook that I was speaking about before, knowing what your goals are, what's most important to you in life. And, for me, it's my family, and knowing how the decisions you make today will affect not only yourself, but others around you. And knowing that when you make one of those small decisions today, how it affects yourself and those around you that you love. And when you do that on a daily basis, it's easy to sleep at night, and it's easy to sit down at the end of the night and say, hey, that was a good day, and think about it that way versus and second guess yourself months down the road. You had your end game, you had your goal, and it was always achievable, but you're making steps on a daily basis to achieve that.
Great. That's very well said. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking some time today. Really, really appreciate it. And want to tell everybody out there, thanks for listening for our Planning for Life podcast. It's the one thing that we help you do that a lot of people don't do, which is plan and plan for today and also in the future. So I'm Carl Coolidge, and along with Kevin, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Russell C. Jacobs III, Carl B. Coolidge, James Jacobs, and William Schwartz are registered representatives of and offer securities, investment advisory, and financial planning services through MML Investor Services, LLC, member SIPC, Supervisory Office, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, LLC is not a subsidiary or affiliate of MML Investor Services, LLC, or its affiliated companies.